Hello and welcome to New Filmmakers Los Angeles in partnership with Movie Maker magazine. My name is Danny DeLillo. We're here at the South Park Center. I'm delighted to join Pablo with his movie Bajo la Tierra. Let's take another clip. Pablo, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, welcome to the New Filmmakers LA family. I'm glad that being from LA, it's finally you're in our family now as well, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Congratulations on your film.
Thank you.
Seriously, it was definitely one for the big screen last night. But for those that haven't seen it, tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so the movie's called Bajo la Tierra. I like to describe it as a bit of a supernatural drama. It's period. It takes place in 1845, Alta California, which is California when it was still part of Mexico.
Yep. And
it's about Alma. She's this young pottery maker, and she's a bit of a workaholic. So much so that she begins to neglect the most important person in her life, which is her mother. And so when her mother tragically passes away one day, she's overcome with guilt, and she just dives deeper into work as a way of drowning out that grief. But to unhealthy measures, so much so that she begins to go a little mad, and then things start getting a little strange and supernatural in the house when she thinks she starts to hear her mom.
It's a brilliant story. Like, I had no idea the journey you were taking me on. Like, where I started at the beginning of the film to where I ended up was like, oh my goodness, I was alone with my cats watching this film as well. It's a really clever story. So tell us a little about how you decided to make it in, obviously, the 19th century, 1845. Where did this idea get inspired from?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's two sides to the story. I think just sort of like from a superficial level, I was just like, being Latino and in California, you kind of like, you forget, this was all kind of like part of Mexico at some point. And it's an era and it's kind of a community that's not really talked about in film. It's never been represented on film. And, I just always wanted to explore like this side of like the West, when it was like still part of Mexico. So there's kind of like that side of thing. Love ghost stories as well, love supernatural elements. And then there's the more sort of personal side of things, which is just like, I was developing this story essentially in my first year at AFI when I was just like so overworked and, almost like a bit of a toxic relationship with work, which I think a lot of filmmakers have.
Yeah.
And so around that time, I was just like, not really in touch with family or in touch with myself personally. And it was around the time that I saw my mother lose her mother, my grandmother as well. And so that kind of like really struck me and, made me realize that these sort of things can happen at any point in time. And it made me really just reevaluate my relationship with work and family and where my priorities were. So this is kind of like a bit of an exploration of that.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you for sharing. No, it's always funny when you have to tell people that, this was actually Mexico, like, back in the day, right? Obviously. Really, really great story. I love that you said it in this time period as well. And, again, goodness me, grief is such a hard thing. Right. And, and I think it's interesting to say, because you're not the first person at AFI says, I was so in it, I forget
oh my God.
It's intense, isn't it?
Yeah.
Very intense. But a wonderful, wonderful program. Congratulations being part of an amazing school. But so for you personally, like, delving into this character and obviously in pottery, have you got any association with pottery? How did that come about?
Not really. I mean, the idea behind that was that everything in the movie would be kind of related to dirt.
Yeah.
And this idea that pottery is something that comes from the ground.
Yeah.
This whole thing that essentially gives this family work and they make a living out of also kind of starts to turn into something kind of like scary, and it represents death, so from like life to death and what dirt represents in both of them.
But
no personal connection to that, so it was kind of a bit of a learning curve for us behind the camera as well, to going into the whole process of what that would have looked like back then.
It was fascinating, and I really loved the way this film was shot. Like, it had these moments where you really felt for, obviously, she's grieving, she's going through this whole experience. I think even today grief is explored in so many different avenues, and I think a lot of us in this day and age as well, we tend to grieve for our work, and here it is 1845 and she's grieving through her work as well. But like, it was really such a wonderfully stylistic film, and I love the way that it was shot. and obviously gave us this kind of eerie element to it as well. How did you go about knowing how you wanted it to look and feel and to shoot it?
Very lucky to have made a bit of a really nice partnership while at school. My DP Mac and I kind of like we shot our first short film together at school together, and then it kind of like ended up coming together through thesis. But we felt that we spoke a lot of the same languages cinematically. We both hate coverage. We're very much about like, you know, shooting and shooting intentionally, only shoot what you need, and very, you know, very much away from like handheld. We're like keeping it on a dolly. You know, the way we like to work is very similar. Moving masters, that kind of stuff. That was kind of like always the language that we started with as well. And then in terms of the look, we always wanted it to look kind of like out of place in time, like something that could feel a little bit timeless. We shot digitally, but we still wanted that sort of like organic feel. So we opted to choose an older sort of RE system, which would allow us to basically shoot on these like old anamorphic lenses. These Panasonic, Panavision Panatars, which is like the stuff that they shot Close Encounters on essentially. So we wanted that to kind of like dictate a bit of the look and feel of the movie for that kind of like older, sort of like, you know, just cinematic feeling.
Yeah, that was very stylistic. My goodness. How look with this particular film, like what was it kind of like directing this film? You know, working with your obviously your actor, and how was that experience for you?
It was great. It was great. I was again very lucky with the whole team in that we were all just like in it together and in it 100%. I wouldn't have approached a project like this had I not felt comfortable with the team that I had sort of like built a relationship up already with. But it was rough. It was really hard. It was really hard because the way the film works, not to spoil anything, but there's a bit of sort of like aging that happens, and that kind of forced us to kind of almost shoot in a, you know, just continuously without kind of like going back and forth to kind of like move and remove setups, which made it very difficult. Lots of weather issues, lots of like building issues. The whole set we had to build. Everything was built from scratch. Yeah, we didn't go to any sort of like standing set or anything. The exterior was a facade that we moved around as well.
Oh, you're so clever. That was wow.
No, my PD Andres is like a superhero of a person. But basically we were building up until the night before the shoot at like 12, you know, midnight. Goodness. Wake up the next morning and like start shooting.
Wow, was it really fun to, you know, design or have your production designer create something from scratch?
Yes.
How was that?
Not only was it kind of the only route we could have gone based on like budget limitations, right? But it was also, there's just not a lot of that kind of stuff readily available to us. Yeah. Because for the time period, again, you know, which would be kind of like considered Western nowadays. And it's like a lot more sort of like that cowboy stuff that's available. Yeah. We went out to look for a lot of like cabins and stuff, and they didn't really fit the aesthetic of California, Mexican California at that time, which is kind of like very Adobe kind of like stuff. So we kind of, not only budget-wise, but we also had to make it ourselves because nothing like that existed already. Yeah. So it was a lot of research. It was a lot of visiting a lot of the leftover standing buildings that exist here in California from that time, kind of replicating that architecture and kind of like really getting into it. We were all just getting our hands dirty essentially, and that was
literally.
Cool. Literally.
It's very dirt film. Yeah. No, honestly, I think it was amazing. The kind of, without spoiling too much, but just the journey that you take us on, and like. Because you said you love ghost stories. Did you like playing with the audience in that respect of like not knowing where you're going to take them? Is that something you enjoy?
That's my favorite kind of movie to watch. I feel like we kind of like, we're living in a time right now where, you know, we're so used to movies and to how story works, at least subconsciously, right?
Yeah, you're right.
And, you know, there's people that say that like every story that's been told already, you know, well, every story that can be told has already been told in a certain way. And I think my favorite way to kind of like subvert that is by playing with structure. And, you know, playing with, you know, structure in a sense that you don't know exactly where a story is going. And it can really trip people up when you kind of almost change the genre halfway between the movie, which is kind of like what I like to do to kind of shake the structure a little bit. It's kind of like bring in genre. So you're like, I thought I was watching a drama. Yeah. Is this kind of getting creepy? Like, what's going on? And like, that's just what I love to play with.
I love that you did that. As an audience member, it's always fun to watch. As a producer, I love it when you just take us on that wild journey where you just kind of feeling so many different emotions. And it's hard to do that in a short film as well, to capture all of that. But you did a really, really good job. So how was it? Obviously, I'm so glad that you're part of New Filmmakers LA. It must feel nice to sort of have something in your own city as well, being here. but it was just it was electrifying and wonderful last night. How was it? How was that experience like for you? I mean, it was particularly special because we had, as you know, filmmakers from here in Los Angeles, around the States, around Central and South America. Like, how was that experience for you last night?
It's great. It's great. I think there really is a strong sense of community at this festival. After having done several, you kind of start to, it's almost like you feel less lonely because you start to see a lot of the same people over and over. And you know, this industry that can feel very isolating at times starts to feel like a bit of a smaller circle, and you realize, you know, like how small the world is almost in a way. And it's just kind of really cool to see the same familiar faces kind of like popping up, see what they're doing, you know, they catch up with you. It's just a really strong sense of community, which is, you know, much needed.
I mean, community is everything. We're building families in our film sets as well, aren't we? So every time, what's next for you, Pablo? Where are you taking us next?
I mean, I'm learning to write. I'm terrified of writing. I feel like I feel a lot more comfortable as a director. And I've sort of started to learn in the last couple of years the importance of writing and sort of like pushing your career, even as a director, even if like directing is sort of like your primary goal. And so that's something like I've kind of like been sort of trying to teach myself and learning to love as a craft as well, because it's very complicated, much more complicated, I would say, than directing for me. So, you know, I'm developing a couple features. I'm developing a feature with a producer on this project, a couple on my own, just trying to like force myself to write, to pump stuff out, and developing a couple shorts on the side as well, just to kind of like build up that toolkit before I get to that first feature. Yeah,
well, I mean, listen, congratulations, and you know, don't be terrified because you got, you know, your stories within you to tell, and it's just about when the right time feels right. And please come back with more films, okay?
I'd love to.
All right, please do. But no, thank you so much for bringing your film to us, and just thank you for taking us on this wild journey. And I'm looking forward to where your imagination takes us next.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Pablo, everybody.